40 years this week since the birth of the world's first test tube baby, Louise Brown. But campaigners are warning that if rules that then hadn't been what they are today, she might never have been born. And that's because an increasing number of England's clinical commissioning groups apply more stringent tests who's eligible for IVF on the NHS. Well, joining me now in the studio is Deborah Sloan, who has had unsuccessful IVF, Rakhee Shah, who's had successful treatment, and Dr. Daisy Bennett. Deborah, let's start with you. Just talk me through the experience that you went through.
So we tried to conceive spontaneously for around 2 years, and then we did the usual going to the GP, and we got referred to a consultant. We ended up having 5 cycles of ICSI, IVF ICSI, all of which were unsuccessful, apart from the final round of IVF, which I did get pregnant, but unfortunately I miscarried. So it was a really tough process, really emotionally, financially, physically, really, really draining.
And if you had your time again, would you do it again?
I think I would. I think because you need that hope. You need the hope that you can conceive, and so the science was there to help us. And throughout the whole process, I did have that hope that we would conceive, but unfortunately, it wasn't to be. But I think I would do it again. Yeah.
And on the flip side, you had a positive experience.
I did,
and it ended up in a baby.
Twins.
Oh, twins!
Yes,
which is very common, of course, with IVF.
Yeah, and they turned 10 yesterday, so really, really pleased. Our story, similar, we tried for a year, nothing happened, went to the GP, had all the tests done, and we had a severe malfactor. So my husband's sperm was quite bad in the sense that we were told natural was never, ever going to be an option. So we were referred for IVF. Now, 10 years ago, the NHS waiting time was 3 years from the time from the time you were referred to the time your application actually came through. And my twins were 1 and a half when our NHS referral actually came through. We actually tried a more holistic approach and did the whole lifestyle change, food changes. We could have opened up a pharmacy with the amount of supplements we were on, but it was all positive change, because I used to suffer from horrendous heavy periods. They went from a 10-day bleed down to a 6-day bleed, no cramps, no pain. And I fully believe that because we'd done about 9 months of the whole holistic approach, that my husband and I both were physically, mentally, emotionally in such a strong place that the IVF worked the first time. And both embryos took.
And that was on the NHS, was it?
No,
that was private.
No, we opted to go private because I just felt waiting another 3 years on top of like the year and a half that we had, we were going mad. And everyone around us was falling pregnant, the questions being asked, oh, Joe Bloggs is pregnant, why are you not pregnant, what's going on? So the heartache that you'd get from seeing other people pregnant and it not happening to you, we were like, you know what, doesn't matter what it's going to cost, let's just find someone that's going to help us and do it privately.
I imagine that's the toughest thing. Daisy, you must have to deal with this on a daily basis. What are the challenges that people have when they're thinking about IVF? Because there is such a postcode lottery, isn't there?
It is, that's correct. In terms of the postcode lottery, as you've mentioned, ultimately the final decision falls on the CCGs, which are the clinical commissioning groups. So they have their own set of criteria. And of course, the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence, or NICE, have their own guidelines as well. But they are recommendations. But ultimately, in terms of the budget, it's held by the CCG, who then ultimately decides. And their criteria can be stricter than the NICE guidelines. So whereas, for example, the NICE guidelines suggest that in terms of offering assisted conception such as IVF, the woman needs to be under 43 years of age, and the couple needs to have been having regular intercourse, and that means every 2 to 3 days, which is quite often. So there you see about the emotional stress as well as the physical stress. So having regular sexual intercourse every 2 to 3 days for 2 years. So ultimately, we're trying to get the maximum cycles within those within those 2 years. However, with the CCG criteria, it can vary from area to area.
So it's 3 years in some cases, and the map, I was looking at it earlier, I mean, it's quite astonishing at the difference in postcodes. I remember doing a story last year in Bristol, and they were considering limiting it to 30 to 35 years old, which is such a narrow time frame. Can you see, though, with the NHS under so much pressure, why they have to make cutbacks?
I can understand that you have to make very difficult choices, absolutely. I think, we were just saying this in the green room earlier, that what it ignores, though, is that very personal experience of loss and grief. Our situation was that my husband had children from a previous relationship, so I wasn't allowed NHS IVF,
and that's still the case now.
And it's still the case now, and it's almost like a double whammy on your kind of sense of loss, because in one hand you're finding it difficult to conceive or impossible to conceive, and at the same time you are told that you're not actually able to have funded NHS treatment. So it was very difficult experience for us having it limited.
Yeah. Do you think there's an argument perhaps that those who have the greater chance of getting pregnant from IVF, they're the ones that are given the treatment? Because I suppose there's not a bottomless pit of money, and the NHS prioritises life-saving treatment rather than life-enhancing.
I'm going to add to that to say I work as a women's health therapist, so I do the holistic care based on my own journey, and I feel that often there isn't, maybe due to the lack of funding, but there isn't enough in-depth testing. So I've seen about 14 or 15 male couples, the male partner, who has come to me with what the NHS perceives to be an okay semen analysis, and through our own further private testing, issues have come up with the sperm, which unfortunately haven't been picked up by the NHS. So I think it's a case of where funding is restricted, they're tied as to how much they can offer, and in some cases I think it's just a bit unfair that they're told, oh well, everything's okay, just keep trying.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've got a few friends who've had IVF, and then a couple of them have had it successfully, and then they've gone on and had their second child naturally, and it seems that that's kind of a pattern with certain people. Is that right?
There does seem to be a pattern. There's not much research done on that, but I think that could be an area where research could be done, because on an anecdotal note, I can say that I've seen that too. So a couple who's tried, hasn't had any previous children, gone through the IVF cycle or a few cycles, and you can have up to 3 cycles on the NHS, and then they've gone on to either be successful, if they're successful, and then their second child is conceived naturally, and so on. So and that's where we all mentioned the psychological stress. So not just the physical stress, and we know that there's such a stress and strain on mentally as well as physically. So it's so important to have counselling both pre-treatment, during treatment and after treatment, just so that you're aware that it can put really a lot of stress and strain on not just yourself but the relationship as well. So it is really important.
The lack of psychological support was what actually made me become a fertility counsellor, and so I came out of the IVF experience and a few years later qualified as a fertility counsellor, because I strongly believe that the emotional side is as important. And just on that aspect of people conceiving spontaneously after several years of IVF, yes, it does happen, but as my anecdotal experience of having clients in front of me is that they try years and years and years and they don't ever conceive. So I think it's some and some. It doesn't. It's different for each person.
Thank you for coming in. Thank you for raising awareness. It's important. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.